We get a post-match analysis from sports writer Josh Planos. He joins us through Skype from Lincoln, Nebraska. Hello, Josh, and welcome back to our show.
Hey, Charles. Thanks for having me.
Well, Josh, Pacquiao won via split decision. I know you watched the fight live in Vegas. What are your thoughts on the bout?
Well, I thought it was a pretty straightforward decision. Manny really set the tone early, obviously, with that knockdown. And then to see Thurman kind of battle back and win those middle rounds, I thought was pretty sensational as far as, his camp is concerned. And then, of course, Manny closed the show the way he always does in the championship rounds and really, showed off his IQ and the fact that this was his 28th world title fight. It was impressive. And that Thurman spoke after and said that the right man won, I think is a testament that, boxing rarely gets the decision right. And it seemed like they did the right thing this time. And frankly, this was one of the most impressive fights I've ever seen from Manny Pacquiao. I know his career spans decades and he has beaten just about everybody in the sport, but considering the circumstances, considering the disadvantages that he had on paper, that he showed up and fought that way, I thought was frankly inspiring.
Well, it wasn't only the judges that were right. Actually, you were right even before the fight because we asked you for a fearless forecast before that, and you said Manny will win by split decision, and that's exactly what happened. But during the match, did you really see that this would be the outcome, or did it seem more like a unanimous type of decision, or was it still maybe a questionable fight which could have swung either way?
I mean, it definitely could have swung either way. I do not take credit at all for that prediction. I think Manny just made me look a lot better than I should have. I thought it was a fantastic fight. To me, it was unanimous. That a judge had him losing by 2 points on a scorecard, I think is ridiculous, but everybody in the arena knew it. I certainly knew it. Manny knew it. He delivered everything that he said he would, and really made Thurman, for the most part, eat his words that he used during promos to kind of hype up the event. So I thought it was a fantastic fight, and to me it was unanimous.
Okay, well, in the first round, Pacquiao was able to knock down Thurman. How big was this? Not just in terms of the judge's decision, but I guess with how the fight went. If we were, well, hypothetically, to take out that knockdown that Pacquiao was able to deliver the first round, do you think the match would have changed or would have swung another way?
Certainly. I mean, it was crucial in that he got an additional point on the scorecards and built out such a big advantage in the early going. But psychologically, to me, that was the bigger message that was sent. Not only was, Manny was the older guy in the ring. He was the smaller guy in the ring. He was the less strong guy in the ring. But what that showed was that he was still the guy to beat on Saturday night. And Thurman has spent pretty much his entire career up on his feet. He seldom, if ever, gets knocked down, so that Manny was able to kind of, show him, hey, I've still got a lot left in the tank, and you're in for a long night. I think the psychological effect was a lot greater than, say, the point he got on the scorecard, though the point on the scorecard obviously helped.
Yep. Okay, but how about this, Josh? And, I'm no boxing expert, but from when I was watching the fight, it seemed like Pacquiao actually was on the short end of a lot of punches to his face, which seemed like solid punches, but not once did he seem to be in danger of even falling down or really threatened by those punches. What does that say about Pacquiao, or what does that say about the strength of Keith Thurman? Because it seemed like he was able to land a lot of clean shots.
Yeah, I mean, it probably says a lot about both. Thurman, I thought conditioning was a really big problem for him. He didn't seem to have as much power as he has in previous fights, and he's also coming off surgery off, his elbow and hand. So maybe that had something to do with it. I also think, though, that we have to give credit to Manny because, that his chin was able to withstand that kind of punishment. I mean, I believe CompuBox put out that he had never been hit by that many power punches in his entire career. And like you mentioned, Charles, at no point did it ever look like he was going to go down or that he was, he was rattled, but it seemed like he was really taking a lot of punishment and then just kind of smiling at it like it was nothing. So I think a lot of credit needs to be given to Manny for standing up to that kind of power, but maybe Keith Thurman needs to look himself in the mirror and work on his punching ability before the next fight.
Yeah, that ability of Pacquiao to be able to take those punches really impressed me a lot. But, it seemed like Pacquiao was off to a great start again, obviously. But in the middle rounds, it seemed like he sort of slowed down a bit. Would you say this was probably the age factor for him. It seemed like he tired out a bit because we were so used to seeing Manny being the energizer bunny that he is, not get tired and go on for 12 rounds. But in this fight, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seemed like he actually did get tired at a certain stretches.
I think he did, for sure, Charles. I think age comes for all of us eventually. I don't think those rounds are a sign that Manny, needs to hang it up. For example, obviously he won the fight, but I think he was in the ring with an undefeated world champion. And even if Keith Thurman was not the Keith Thurman of old, it was still a world champion that he was up against. And that's just kind of the nature of fights. It's kind of like a good story, there's tension, and unless the fight is a landslide, it's going to be that way, where there are going to be ebbs and flows, and eventually you're going to get tired. And the way that Manny throws his punches in flurries, I thought I was a little bit worried around the round 6 that he had exhausted seemingly all of his punches, and he had a lot left of the fight left to go. And but he, credit to him, I mean, he's been in that position before, and he made it happen down the stretch. But I certainly don't see it as an indictment of him, being 40.
Okay. Well, Josh, Thurman also, before the fight, he was, crass, talking a lot of trash. But after the fight, he was so gracious, which I really admired about him. And he said he'd take a lot of lessons from this fight. Seeing the fight yourself, what do you think would be the biggest lessons for him? What could he have changed maybe to have had a better result perhaps in this fight?
Well, I think his problem was he tried to fight Manny's fight in the early going. Really, he got his rhythm when he slowed things down and made Manny come to him, and was just kind of picking his advances apart. But initially, he just kind of tried to throw as many punches as Manny was throwing, and that was clearly not going to work out. A big problem, though, for him, I think, and something to take from the fight, is his conditioning needs work. Late in the fight, Manny really hurt him to the ribs, which happens all the time in boxing. But sometimes that means that you need to spend a lot more time on core work. And that's something that Manny lost a fight earlier in his career on a body shot, and made a point that he would never lose another fight to the body ever again. So that's a huge part of his training. And clearly, we saw Thurman hit him a ton in the ribs, and it meant nothing. But Manny hit Thurman in the body, and it really buckled his chances and his body later in the fight. So that's something that he can take from this, is he needs to be in tip-top shape. And even if he looks good compared to, me or like the random person off the street, this is elite boxing. It's things like that separate the elite fighters from the good fighters. And, Manny really showcased that on Saturday night.
Right now, Josh, lastly, Pacquiao, obviously the oldest welterweight champion in boxing history. It doesn't seem like he's going to retire just yet. Lots of names being thrown out there: Crawford, Spence. Who do you think he should fight? What would be the best fight for Manny Pacquiao?
I think it would be in his best interest if he did not take a Crawford or Spence fight. Those guys are athletic freaks in the primes of their career. They're really smart defensively, which obviously is a really big problem for Manny because he's so offensively minded. I would not take those fights. I know that they're lucrative and he could make a ton of money by signing up for them, but I think those are really problematic. And the last thing you want to do is go out on a low note. So I would fight, if I were him, I would consider Danny Garcia. He's a former title holder. He's not necessarily a defensive specialist, but he's a big enough name. And frankly, people would watch Manny fight a garbage can, so I think that he would be able to, be a bankable star. It could be a fun event, and it could be a pretty fair matchup. So I would look to Danny Garcia next.
All right, that's very interesting. Well, Josh, our time's up, but such a pleasure talking to you again. Thanks so much for analyzing this fight with us.
Thanks for having me, Charles.